Have you ever felt more alone in a crowded room than you do in complete silence? You're nodding, you're smiling, you're playing the part. But inside, there's a hollowness, a soul-deep exhaustion from the relentless effort of pretending. If you know that feeling, then you need to listen very closely, because that feeling isn't a flaw in your character. It's a signpost, pointing toward a truth that society desperately tries to hide from you. For years you've been fed a simple lie, that happiness comes from belonging, that your worth is measured by your social circle. But what if that's all backward? What if the constant need for others isn't a sign of being well-adjusted, but a symptom of inner poverty? This isn't another list of cheap social hacks or tips on how to be more charismatic. This is a philosophical blueprint for reclaiming your mind. A truth the great philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer understood over 150 years ago, and one that is more urgent today than ever before. Every single day you spend forcing conversations you don't care about, and seeking approval from people you don't respect. A small piece of your true self dies. But the smartest, strongest, most independent minds in history discovered a secret. They don't just tolerate being alone. They choose it. In this video, we are going to dismantle the social programming that has made you fear your own company, expose the invisible war being waged for your conformity, and hand you the weapons to win it. So, if you're tired of the mask, and you're ready to meet the person underneath it, then stay with me. The journey starts now. The quiet hell of being surrounded by fools. There's a unique kind of exhaustion, isn't there? It's not the satisfying ache of a body pushed to its limits, or the peaceful fatigue after a day of meaningful work. No. This is a hollowed-out, soul-deep weariness that settles in after being in a crowd. You come home from a party, a work event, a family gathering, and you feel drained. It's the quiet hell of being surrounded by people, yet feeling utterly and profoundly alone in your own mind. It's a silent suffering that you're told you shouldn't even feel. Picture it. You're in a room smiling, nodding along to a story you've heard 100 times. You're participating in a conversation about celebrity gossip or the latest trivial outrage, and on the outside you're playing your part perfectly. But inside your mind is screaming for substance, for one genuine thought, for something that actually matters. It's a desperate internal plea for a signal in a world full of noise, and the dissonance between your inner world and the outer one is almost deafening. This isn't just social awkwardness or introversion. It's a clash of frequencies. Think of your mind as a finely tuned instrument, capable of understanding complex symphonies of thought and emotion. Now imagine being forced to listen to nothing but a single, off-key note, played on repeat, all day long. That grating, relentless banality isn't just boring, it's painful. It's the mental equivalent of nails on a chalkboard, and it makes you want to retreat not out of hatred, but out of a deep need for harmony. For years you've likely asked yourself, what's wrong with me? Why can't I just enjoy these simple things like everyone else? But you've been asking the wrong question. The real question is, what if there's nothing wrong with me at all? What if this feeling of alienation isn't a sign of a personal defect, but proof of an inner richness? It's the feeling of a wealthy man sitting in a room where everyone is excitedly trading counterfeit coins. You don't join in, not because you're arrogant, but because you know what real gold looks like. For some, this happens in the sterile environment of a corporate boardroom. You're in a brainstorming session, and the most celebrated idea is a watered-down, risk-averse, painfully mediocre concept, yet everyone is clapping. For others, it's at a family dinner, where the conversation is pinned to the wall with the same old stories and surface-level judgments while your mind is wrestling with questions about purpose and meaning. In both scenarios, the feeling is the same. You are a stranger in your own life, an actor playing a role you never auditioned for. This constant performance chips away at you. Each shallow conversation, each forced smile, is a tiny betrayal of your own soul. It's a slow, methodical erosion of your intellectual spirit. Think of it like this. Your mental energy is a finite resource, a deep well of fresh water. Every meaningless interaction is someone dipping a dirty cup into it, muddying the clarity you work so hard to maintain. Eventually, you find the well has run dry, and you're left with nothing but sludge. And so you wear the mask of the interested friend, the engaged colleague, the agreeable family member. It's heavy, and it's suffocating. You learn to feign enthusiasm so well that sometimes you almost fool yourself. But at the end of the day, When you're alone, the mask comes off, and the crushing weight of that inauthenticity hits you. How much of your life force are you willing to sacrifice just to appear normal in a world that feels anything but? This private torment, this feeling of being an outsider looking in, is not some random misfortune. It's not an accident that you feel this way. It is a direct symptom of a much larger unspoken conflict. A silent battle is being waged, not just in rooms full of people, but within society itself. So the question becomes, if your personal hell is just one battlefield, what is the nature of this invisible war being fought for your mind? Society's invisible war on the independent mind. That feeling of being an outsider isn't just in your head. It's the consequence of a real, ongoing, and invisible war. Society, as the philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer saw it, isn't some benevolent collective striving for truth and enlightenment. It's a vast, sprawling organism driven by a blind primal will to survive. And its survival depends on one thing above all others: conformity. It doesn't want unique, unpredictable individuals. It wants predictable, manageable parts for its machine. Your independence is a direct threat to its stability. Schopenhauer argued that society is governed by a set of unspoken rules designed to keep the peace, not to discover the truth. Politeness is valued more than honesty. Appearance is valued more than substance. This is why you feel so out of place. You're trying to have a deep, honest conversation in a system that is fundamentally designed for superficiality. You're looking for authenticity in a world that runs on performance, and the system itself is structured to wear you down until you finally agree to play the game like everyone else. Think of society as a great shepherd, and the majority of people as its flock. The shepherd offers comfort, a sense of belonging, and the illusion of safety within the herd. In exchange, the sheep give up their autonomy. They follow without question. But the independent mind, your mind, is different. You're the one who stops, looks up from the grass and asks, "Wait, why are we all walking in this direction?" The moment you do that, you become a problem for the shepherd and a source of irritation for the other sheep. The weapons in this war aren't physical. They are far more subtle and in many ways more effective. They are the weapons of shame, ridicule, and social pressure. Society has perfected the art of making you feel guilty for wanting to be alone, of labeling your need for depth as arrogance, and your silence as strange. It's a psychological campaign waged against your spirit, designed to make you doubt yourself so intensely that you come running back to the safety of the herd, begging for its acceptance. You see this on the battlefield of your daily life. At work in the West, it's the cult of the team player, a label often used to silence dissent and enforce groupthink, even when the group is marching toward a terrible decision. In a more traditional family setting, perhaps in India or elsewhere, it's the immense, suffocating pressure to follow a pre-approved life script, get the right degree, the right job, the right spouse. To deviate is to risk being branded a failure or an outcast, a deep-seated fear that keeps so many in line. This entire war is fueled by one great pervasive lie: the idea that belonging is the ultimate human goal, that your personal happiness is directly proportional to how well you fit in. We are sold this fantasy from birth. But for the person who has glimpsed what lies beyond the pasture fence, this is a devastating untruth. For you, fitting in isn't a source of peace. It's a form of imprisonment. It is the slow, soul-crushing death of your true self, trading your freedom for a cage with comfortable bedding. So that exhaustion you feel? It's battle fatigue. You are fighting this invisible war every single day, whether you realize it or not. Every time you hold your tongue, every time you force a smile, every time you resist the urge to just walk away, you are on the front lines. You are defending the fortress of your mind against a relentless siege. It's no wonder you're tired. You are a soldier in a war most people don't even know exists. And here is where the enemy reveals its most brilliant, most insidious strategy. It has taken the one thing that could be your ultimate weapon, your path to freedom, and convinced you that it's a punishment. Society has taught you to fear being alone, to see it as a mark of failure. But what if that's the biggest lie of all? What if this thing you've been taught to dread is actually the key to unlocking your greatest power? Redefining loneliness. Your greatest untapped power. Let's dismantle the biggest lie you've ever been told. The lie that being alone is a sign of failure. This idea has been drilled into you since birth. used as a tool to keep you tethered to the herd. Your fear of being cast out, of being labeled a loner, is the very chain they use to control you. But we are going to break that chain right now. Because what society calls loneliness is not a weakness. It is, in fact, your most misunderstood, most powerful, and most underutilized asset. Here is the key, the radical distinction that changes the entire game. The herd experiences loneliness. The individual chooses solitude. Schopenhauer pointed this out brilliantly. Loneliness is the pain you feel when you are deprived of the company of others. But solitude? Solitude is the profound pleasure you feel in the company of yourself. It is not an absence of others, but the powerful, intentional presence of you. It's not being antisocial, it's being fiercely pro-self. Society sells you the myth that you are an incomplete half, destined to wander the earth looking for someone or something to make you whole. It's a brilliant marketing campaign for codependency. It keeps you searching, needy, and forever consuming. The forbidden truth is that you were born whole. You are already a complete universe. Solitude is simply the act of exploring that universe, of realizing that you don't need to import your sense of worth from the outside world because you are the source. So why is this state so powerful? Because it's the only place you can actually hear yourself think. The world is a cacophony of opinions, expectations, and advertisements all screaming for your attention. Solitude is the act of hitting the mute button on all of it. It's in that silence that you finally disconnect from the social matrix of validation and plug directly into your own intuition, your own intellect. You stop reacting to the world's agenda and start creating your own. You can begin this reframe today. The next time a friend cancels plans, feel that initial sting of rejection, and then consciously flip the script. This isn't a rejection. It's a gift of 2 hours of unexpected freedom to read, to think, to work on that project you keep putting off. When you choose to spend a Saturday night coding, writing, or just thinking, instead of going out, don't see it as a social sacrifice. See it as laying another brick in the foundation of your own inner fortress. Of course, there's a reason most people run from solitude. They are terrified of what they'll find in the silence. They've been so conditioned to seek external distraction that they can't bear to be alone with their own unresolved thoughts and anxieties. Choosing solitude is therefore an act of supreme courage. It's looking into the mirror of your own mind and not flinching. It is the declaration that you are ready to face yourself, all of yourself, without needing the world to hold your hand. This shift in perspective, from seeing loneliness as a curse to seeing solitude as a choice, is the first most crucial step toward real mental freedom. It's the master key that unlocks every other door. If these ideas are hitting home, if you feel that spark of recognition, then hit that subscribe button. This is what we do here. Subscribing isn't just about watching videos. It's about joining a silent revolution of thinkers who are reclaiming their minds. It ensures you'll never miss the tools you need to continue this transformation. Now, you've made the choice. You've accepted that solitude is your training ground, but simply sitting alone in a room achieves nothing. That is just empty isolation, a waiting room for life to happen. The real question is, what do you do with that sacred space? How do you actively use your solitude not just to find peace, but to forge yourself into something powerful, something unbreakable, building your inner citadel? How to cultivate intellectual wealth. So, you've embraced solitude, but what now? This isn't about passively sitting in a quiet room and waiting for enlightenment to strike. That's not solitude. That's just isolation. Active solitude is the work of an architect, and you are the architect of your own mind. Your project is to build an inner citadel, a mental fortress so strong, so well stocked, and so magnificent that it becomes your primary source of meaning, stimulation, and power. The work is hard, but this is the most important thing you will ever build. The foundation of your citadel is laid with one crucial activity: deliberate knowledge intake. I'm not talking about the mindless, endless scroll through social media feeds, which is designed to make you a passive consumer of trivialities. I'm talking about the active, challenging work of reading the great minds. Schopenhauer himself insisted on this. The first actionable step is simple. Trade 30 minutes of passive scrolling for 30 minutes of active reading. Pick up the Stoics, read Nietzsche, dive into history. This isn't for entertainment. It's for forging weapons for your mind. But consuming knowledge is only the first step. The second pillar of your citadel is deep reflection, turning that knowledge into personal wisdom. This is where a practice like journaling becomes essential. Not a diary to record what you ate for lunch, but a war room for your thoughts. Ask yourself hard questions and answer them with brutal honesty. What belief did I cling to today out of fear? Where did I act to please others instead of myself? This practice takes the steel you've imported from books and forges it into a blade that is uniquely yours. Think of your mind as a garden. For most people, that garden is untended, choked with weeds planted by society, anxieties, insecurities, borrowed opinions. Active solitude is the art of mental gardening. Reading the great thinkers is like planting the seeds of giant, powerful trees. The daily practice of journaling and reflection is the patient, methodical work of pulling up the weeds one by one. It's not glorious, and the garden won't transform overnight. But it will, for the first time, be your garden. The third strategy for building your walls is the pursuit of mastery. Choose a skill, any skill that demands intense focus, and dedicate yourself to it. It could be learning to code, mastering a musical instrument, or becoming exceptional at a specific business strategy. The state of flow you enter during this deep work is a powerful form of active solitude. It silences the noise of the world and builds an unshakable sense of self-worth based on real competence, not on the shifting sands of others' opinions. This is what it means to cultivate intellectual wealth. Schopenhauer argued that the person with a rich inner life can never be truly bored or lonely, because they carry an entire world within them. They are a stark contrast to the person of inner poverty, who is in a constant, desperate search for external distractions to escape the howling emptiness inside. Your citadel is not a prison to hide from the world. It is a treasure house you've built, brick by brick. You're not escaping life. You're building a life within. Let's make this concrete. Imagine you're at a career crossroads, a situation many of you face. The conventional path, the one your family in Mumbai or your boss in New York expects, pulls you one way. The old you would have polled your friends, agonized over opinions. The new you retreats to the citadel. You read books on strategy. You journal about what failure and success truly mean to you. You spend your weekends working on that side project that sets your soul on fire. The final decision comes not from the noisy marketplace of public opinion, but from the quiet throne room of your own fortified mind. You are laying the foundations. You are pulling the weeds and planting the seeds. Your inner fortress is beginning to take shape and its walls are growing taller every day. But here's the thing about building a fortress. People on the outside notice. The herd gets nervous when one of its own starts becoming self-sufficient. They will come to test your walls, and they won't use battering rams. They'll use something far more powerful. Something you've been trained your whole life to fear. The gravity of guilt. Resisting the pull of the herd. The moment you begin to build your fortress, the world sends its army. But this army doesn't arrive with drums and banners. It comes quietly, disguised as the people you love and respect. Their weapon isn't anger. It's a soft, poisonous whisper. It's the look of disappointment from your parents, the passive-aggressive comment from a friend, the sudden accusation that you've changed. This is the gravity of the herd. A powerful, invisible force designed to pull you right back down into the comforting mud of conformity. And its primary agent is guilt. Let's be very clear about what guilt is in this context. It's not a moral compass. It's a social control mechanism. Guilt is the alarm system the tribe installs in you to ensure you never stray too far from its rules. When you choose an evening of focused work over a meaningless social gathering, you are violating a prime directive of the herd. The group is more important than the individual. The guilt you feel isn't proof that you've done something wrong. It's a withdrawal symptom from a lifelong addiction to social approval. Imagine you've been a marionette your whole life, and you didn't even know it. Strings of expectation were attached to your arms and legs, making you dance to a tune you didn't choose. Choosing solitude is the act of looking up, seeing the strings, and cutting them, one by one. Guilt is the phantom pain of those severed strings. It's the muscle memory of a lifetime of being pulled and manipulated. The first task of a free mind is to learn the difference between true moral failure and the phantom pain of breaking your conditioning. You see this gravity at work everywhere. In a Western corporate culture, maybe you skip the mandatory after-work drinks and are met with cold shoulders the next day. The unspoken message is a threat. You are not one of us. Your career will suffer. In a family-centric culture like in India, you might decline a large family function to protect your energy and focus on your goals. The response is swift. Emotional appeals about duty, tradition, and the cardinal sin of selfishness. The pressure is immense because it's designed to be. So how do you shield yourself? You must build your philosophical armor. You have to understand that your emotional state is your own sovereign territory. You don't have to let anyone in to plant their seeds of guilt. When someone calls you selfish, you must learn to pause before you react. Interrogate the accusation. Is it truly selfish to invest in your own strength, clarity, and well-being? Or is it perhaps the most generous thing you can do for the world? To offer it the best version of yourself, rather than a depleted, resentful shell. It helps to understand the psychology of those trying to pull you back. Often it's not conscious malice. It is their own fear projected onto you. Your newfound freedom is a painful mirror, reflecting the bars of their own cage. Your self-sufficiency highlights their own neediness and dependence on the group. When they try to make you feel guilty for walking your own path, they are often unconsciously trying to validate their own choice to stay on the well-trodden road. This insight can transform your resentment into a kind of detached understanding. You can practice this resistance in small ways. The next time you need to decline an invitation, do it without a long, apologetic excuse. A simple, firm, "Thank you for the invitation, but I won't be able to make it," is enough. You don't owe anyone a detailed audit of your time, which is your most precious, non-renewable resource. Every time you do this, you strengthen your own frame. You teach yourself and them that your boundaries are real. You weaken their gravitational pull, and so you learn to stand firm. You learn to wear their accusations of selfishness and arrogance like a badge of honor. The gravity of the herd begins to lose its hold. But true power isn't just about building walls and defending them. That's a life of siege. The ultimate stage is when your presence alone changes the dynamic of the room. So what happens when you are so firmly rooted in your own being that their gravity can no longer touch you? What kind of authority do you begin to project then? The silent authority of the man who needs nothing. After you've weathered the storms of guilt and solidified the walls of your inner citadel, something remarkable begins to happen. The dynamic shifts. You move from a state of pure defense to one of passive, profound influence. You walk into a room and without saying a word, the room changes. You haven't sought power, you haven't demanded respect, but you find you have it anyway. This is the emergence of silent authority, the natural radiance of a mind that is finally its own master. This isn't the loud, fragile authority of a petty tyrant who needs to raise his voice to feel important. That is the authority of weakness. This is the deep, calm, resonant authority of someone who is completely self-possessed. It flows from one simple, earth-shattering truth. You no longer need anything from the people around you. Not their approval, not their validation, not their laughter, not their agreement. Your sense of worth is generated internally now. This profound lack of need is the secret source of all social power. Consider two men in a high-stakes negotiation. The first man is desperate to close the deal. His future depends on it. His voice is tight. His posture is weak. He reeks of neediness. The second man is perfectly content to walk away empty-handed. He has other options. He is relaxed, calm, and present. Who holds all the cards? The man who needs nothing. Now apply this principle to every single social interaction in your life. When you cease to need, you begin to lead. People feel this on a primal, intuitive level. They are accustomed to a world of transactional relationships, a constant dance of neediness where everyone is subtly trying to extract something from everyone else. When they encounter someone who is a complete, self-contained unit, someone who radiates a quiet, internal contentment, it's both profoundly disarming and deeply magnetic. They can't quite put their finger on it, but they recognize it as strength. They respect it instantly. Let's bring this to life. Imagine a man in a tense project meeting in Toronto. A senior manager aggressively challenges his proposal. The old version of him would have immediately become defensive, his voice cracking as he scrambled for their approval. But the man who has built his inner citadel is different. He listens calmly, his posture unchanged. His self-worth is not tied to the fate of this single idea. Because he isn't desperate for their validation, he can respond with unshakable, logical clarity. His lack of need gives his words an undeniable weight. A powerful side effect of this transformation is that people stop trying to play their games with you. The subtle manipulations, the passive-aggressive jabs, the social one-upmanship, it all just bounces off your armor. You become, in a sense, illegible to those who operate solely on the level of ego politics. They sense that their usual tactics won't work on you. You're not even playing their game anymore. You're on a completely different field. This makes you a quiet, formidable, and respected presence. But let's be clear. This authority cannot be faked. This isn't about learning a few power poses or communication tricks from a weekend seminar. That's just putting on a costume. This silent authority is the irreversible byproduct of the deep, solitary inner work you have done. It is the natural posture of a mind that has found its own unshakable center of gravity. The world respects the man who first respects himself, and the deepest form of self-respect is the diligent, lonely work of building your own soul. So now you have it. You possess this quiet strength. You are a fortress, secure and self-sufficient. But the ultimate goal was never to become a hermit, permanently locked away from the world. A fortress that is never breached can easily become a prison. The final, most challenging and most rewarding step is learning how to open the gates on your own terms. How do you engage with the world from this position of power, without once again getting pulled into its chaos? The hedgehog's wisdom. Mastering the art of selective connection, you've achieved a state of inner sovereignty. Your peace of mind is no longer dependent on the chaotic world outside. But a king who never leaves his castle is not a king. He is a prisoner. The goal of building this fortress was never to hide from life forever. The final, most advanced skill is to learn how to open the gates and engage with the world, but this time, entirely on your own terms. This is the art of connection from a position of unshakable strength. For this, we turn to one of Schopenhauer's most brilliant and enduring metaphors, the hedgehog's dilemma. Imagine a group of hedgehogs on a freezing cold night. To survive, they need to huddle together for warmth, but as they draw closer, they begin to prick each other with their sharp spines. In pain, they pull apart, only to feel the biting cold again. All night, they oscillate between the pain of proximity and the pain of isolation, searching for that perfect distance. This dilemma is the eternal story of human relationships. The warmth is our innate need for connection, love, and companionship. The spines are the unavoidable, irritating, and often painful aspects of other people's personalities. Their ego, their insecurities, their judgments, their sheer otherness. The freezing cold is the desolate loneliness of complete isolation. We are forever caught between the desire for intimacy and the wounds that intimacy can inflict. This is the human condition in a nutshell. But the man who has built his inner citadel has a profound advantage. He has generated his own inner warmth. He is no longer desperately seeking heat from others to survive. This changes everything. The hedgehog's wisdom is understanding that the answer isn't to fuse together, nor is it to freeze alone. It's to masterfully control the distance. You can now consciously choose who you allow into your space, how close you let them get, and precisely when it's time to create distance again. Let's apply this. Think of that draining family gathering you used to endure for hours out of obligation. The old you would sit there, getting pricked by every passive-aggressive comment and shallow conversation, until you were emotionally bleeding. The wise hedgehog, however, attends intentionally. He engages genuinely, shares his warmth for an hour, and then, before the spines become unbearable, he politely and unapologetically excuses himself. He got the warmth, and he avoided the wounds. He controlled the distance. This wisdom revolutionizes your closest relationships. You stop looking for friends or a partner to complete you, or to be your sole source of warmth. Instead, you are drawn to other self-sufficient hedgehogs, people who have their own inner fire, and who understand and respect your need for space. Your connections become less about desperate clinging neediness and more about two whole universes deliberately choosing to overlap for a time. The quality of your relationships skyrockets, while the drama plummets. This isn't about being cold or calculating. In fact, it's the foundation for a deeper, more authentic form of compassion. You can finally appreciate the warmth of others, because you no longer fear their spines. You can be more generous with your energy because you know how to protect it. You are in the world, but you are no longer at its mercy. You can offer genuine warmth to those who deserve it, precisely because you are no longer freezing to death yourself. So the journey comes full circle. You began as a lonely outcast suffering in the crowd. You became a warrior fighting for your own mind. You became an architect, building your inner citadel, and then a king ruling a silent kingdom. And now, you've become the wise diplomat, moving through the world with grace and power. The path of solitude, paradoxically, has not taught you how to hide from the world, but how to finally, truly, and wisely connect with it. We have traveled a great distance together today. We began in the quiet hell of a crowded room and journeyed to the throne room of your inner citadel. You now see that social exhaustion is not a weakness but a sign of strength, and that what society calls loneliness is the sacred ground for building an unbreakable mind. This journey is about understanding that true power comes not from what you have, but from what you no longer need from the outside world. It is the ultimate freedom, a form of self-possession so rare that most will never know it's possible. So the question is no longer, why do I feel so different? The only question that matters now is, what will I do with this power? Will you continue to hand over the keys to your mind to a world that doesn't deserve them? Will you let the gravity of the herd pull you back down into mediocrity? Or will you stand firm in your solitude, embrace the wisdom of the hedgehog, and engage with life on your own damn terms? The choice, for the first time, is truly yours. If you are ready to make that choice, then make sure you are subscribed with notifications turned on. This channel is a sanctuary for those who think differently. To affirm your decision, comment, "I choose solitude" down below. It's not just a comment. It's a declaration of your mental independence and your entry into a community of thinkers walking the same path. Master yourself first. The rest will follow.